When I first saw the news about the company being sold, I thought it was a mistake. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the article again and again, staring at the headline that carried my late husband's name. The company we built together, the company that carried his sweat, his dreams, his legacy. It said, Mason Industries acquired for $12 million, led by CEO Daniel Hayes. Daniel Hayes, my son-in-law, my daughter's husband, the man I once welcomed into our home like a son. I froze. The mug of tea slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I could still hear the echo of my husband's voice from years ago. If anything happens to me, make sure the company stays in the family, the right way. That company wasn't just a business. It was our life. Every corner of it had a piece of him. His laugh, his long nights, his grease-stained hands fixing the first machine we ever bought. I still remember the day we opened the doors together, the smell of paint, the golden morning light, and how proud he looked when he said, "We did it, Nora." And now, years later, that same company was gone, without my knowledge, without my signature. I sat at the dining table staring at the article, my heart racing. How could he sell it? I whispered under my breath. My daughter, Emily, walked in, cheerful as ever. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, noticing the broken mug. I looked up at her, the same soft brown eyes she got from her father, and forced a smile. "Just dropped it," I said quietly. She didn't notice the laptop screen open beside me. Or maybe she did, and chose to ignore it. That hurt more, because deep down, I knew she must have known something. Have you ever felt that moment when everything you built, everything you trusted, suddenly feels like it never belonged to you? I paused, turning slightly toward the invisible audience I often imagined, the kind souls who might understand. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you treated like your own child, tap that heart symbol so I know I'm not alone. That evening, I sat by the window, the soft light of sunset painting the room gold. I held the framed photo of my husband, John, close to my chest. "You trusted him, didn't you?" I whispered. "You thought he'd take care of Emily, of everything." My voice cracked. "But John, he sold your dream." My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Mom, we're having dinner tonight. I have some good news to share." I almost laughed. Good news. My chest tightened with quiet anger. I decided to go. I needed to hear it from him, to see his face when he lied to me. Dinner was at their place, a large modern house that my husband would have found too cold. The table was perfectly set, candles flickering, and Emily's smile seemed forced. "Mom, I'm glad you came," Daniel said, his voice smooth, practiced. "I wanted to tell you first. Mason Industries was acquired by a major firm. It's a huge win for us." I kept my face calm. "Us?" I asked softly. "Yes," he said proudly. "It's going to make life easier for everyone. No more financial pressure, no more risk. I did what your husband would have wanted." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Did you?" I asked quietly. Emily shifted uncomfortably. "Daniel," she began, but he interrupted. "You don't understand, Mom." The company was stagnating. This was the right move. "And whose decision was that?" I asked. The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. Daniel looked confused. "Mine, of course. I've been running it for years now. The papers were signed last week." I leaned back, my eyes never leaving his face. "Interesting," I said softly, "because I wasn't aware you had the authority to sell it." His smile faltered. "Well, Emily and I discussed." "Discussed?" I interrupted, my voice low but steady. "Daniel, the company wasn't yours to sell." The color drained from his face. Emily's hand trembled as she set her glass down. "Mom, please don't make a scene," she whispered. "A scene?" I said, my voice breaking just slightly. Do you have any idea what your father sacrificed for that company? For you? Daniel exhaled, clearly irritated. Nora, with all due respect, this was a business decision. Times have changed. Yes, I said, leaning forward. But names on legal papers don't change just because you decide they should. The silence that followed was deafening. He looked at me, then at Emily, then back at me. I could see the flicker of fear behind his calm mask. For the first time that night, I smiled. A small, knowing smile. Enjoy your dinner, I said softly, standing up. You might need the strength for what's coming. As I walked out, I could hear Emily whisper, "What does she mean by that?" I didn't turn around. I didn't need to, because what Daniel didn't know, what he never thought to check, was that my husband had left the company under two names, his and mine. And that recording on my husband's old tape, the one labeled for Nora, in case, contained something even Daniel couldn't erase. I stood under the night sky, clutching my bag tightly, my heart pounding. You thought you sold everything, Daniel, I whispered to myself, but you forgot who still owns the soul of that company. I looked straight ahead, eyes glinting with both pain and purpose. This isn't over. Not yet. The morning after that dinner, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that holds memories more than peace. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky turn from gray to pale pink. For a long time, I didn't move. My husband's old office light still flickered every now and then. It was motion censored, but he used to call it our guardian light. I could almost hear his voice in the cold morning air. Nora, never let go of what we built together. Not for anyone. Those words used to sound like love. Now they sounded like a warning I hadn't understood soon enough. As the steam rose from my cup, my mind wandered back years ago, before Daniel came into the picture. Back when Emily was still our little girl, running through the factory floor with her father's safety helmet sliding over her eyes. John would laugh, lift her up and say, "One day, this will all be yours, sweetheart." The workers adored her, and she adored them back. We were one family then, not rich, not poor, just proud of what we had built with our hands. When John passed away, everything changed in slow, quiet ways. It started with kind words, Daniel offering to help with the paperwork or modernize the business. He was polite, respectful, and always said the right things, at least in the beginning. But greed doesn't shout. It whispers softly until you stop recognizing its voice. I remembered the first time I noticed something off. The way Daniel avoided eye contact whenever John's name came up. Or how Emily would defend him even when I wasn't accusing him of anything. I wanted to believe she was just in love, not blind. A soft rain began to fall, tapping gently on the porch roof. I looked out at the garden, the one John had planted with his bare hands. Each flower had a story. The white lilies were for our anniversary, the roses for Emily's graduation. Now some of them were dying, and I hadn't noticed until that moment. I sighed, whispering, maybe that's what happens when you start losing the people you love. You stop seeing the things that are fading. Later that day, I visited the old office. Dust had settled on the frames and desks, but the smell was the same. Faint oil, coffee, and paper. On the wall hung our first company photo. John, me, the workers, and Emily as a little girl, smiling wide. My fingers traced the glass. We worked too hard for this, I murmured, too hard to have it stolen. In the corner, I found an old cabinet with files stacked unevenly. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but something told me not to leave. Then, under a stack of old invoices, I found a yellow folder with my name on it. Nora M. Mason. Co-ownership documentation. My breath caught. Inside were signed contracts, notarized, sealed. My husband had transferred 50% of company ownership to me before his death. I'd forgotten about it. It had felt symbolic back then, not important. Daniel must have assumed everything had been transferred to Emily after the will reading, but it hadn't. Not entirely. As I read through the papers, a folded letter slipped out. It was in John's handwriting. If you're reading this, Nora, then you're facing something I feared might happen. I trusted Daniel, but never fully. People change when money becomes easy. Keep these papers safe. They may protect not just the company, but our name. My hands trembled. I sat there for what felt like hours, the rain still falling outside, the air thick with memories and dread. You were right again, John, I whispered. You always were. That evening, I called an old friend, Richard, John's former business partner. He was in his 70s now, retired, but his mind was sharp as ever. Nora, he said, surprised. It's been ages. How are you holding up? I need your help, I said softly. It's about Mason Industries. He hesitated. I saw the news. I didn't believe it. John would have never allowed that. He didn't, I said, but Daniel did. Without my consent, there was silence on the line. Then, Richard's voice lowered. Nora, you still have the co-ownership papers, don't you? I found them today. Then listen to me carefully, he said. If Daniel sold it without your signature, that sale isn't legal. He's walking on thin ice. I closed my eyes. He doesn't know. Richard chuckled softly. Then I suggest you don't tell him yet. Let him dig his own hole a little deeper. When the call ended, I sat there in the dark, the faint glow of the lamp flickering beside me. I picked up my husband's photo from the table. Sometimes the ones we love most are the ones who break us, I whispered. If you understand that pain, comment true. Maybe someone out there knows what this feels like. The next morning, Emily dropped by. She looked uneasy, her hair slightly messy, her tone distracted. Mom, Daniel said you left dinner early last night. Everything okay? I smiled faintly. Yes, dear. Just old memories catching up. She nodded, avoiding my gaze. Then she noticed the papers spread across the coffee table. What are those? Oh, just some old documents from your father's office, I said. I've been cleaning. Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or fear. You shouldn't stress yourself, Mom. Let Daniel handle all that. He's been under pressure lately. Pressure from what? I asked gently. She froze for a second too long. Just business things. You know how complicated it gets. I watched her closely. Yes, I do. Your father used to handle complicated things too, but he never hid them from me. That hit her. She stood up quickly. I have to go. We'll talk later, okay? Of course, I said softly, watching her walk out. The door clicked shut, leaving the faint scent of her perfume in the room, the same one John used to buy for her birthdays. When I turned back to the table, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A small envelope, half tucked under the edge of the vase. My heart skipped. I hadn't seen it earlier. Carefully, I picked it up. My name was written in Daniel's handwriting. Inside was a short note. Stay out of company matters, Nora. It's done. Let it go. For everyone's sake. No signature, no warmth, just cold arrogance on paper. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers tightening around it until the paper crumpled. You think you can silence me, Daniel? I whispered. You really don't know me at all. I looked out the window, the rain still falling, and thought of John again, his calm eyes, his faith in me. If you've ever given everything to your family and still felt invisible, I said softly to no one and everyone at once, tap that heart symbol so I know you exist. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out something I hadn't touched in years, a small black recorder. The same one John used to record company meetings, ideas, even bedtime stories for Emily when he worked late. I pressed the button. The old familiar crackle filled the room, and then his voice, warm, steady, loving, echoed through the years.
Nora, if anything ever goes wrong, remember this. The truth always leaves traces. You just have to know where to look. I covered my mouth as tears slipped down my cheeks, and then the last part of the recording played, one I'd never heard before. I left the original ownership confirmation in the vault, the one behind the portrait in the old office. It's yours, Nora. Always was. My pulse quickened. The vault? The portrait? I stood, grabbed my coat, and headed toward the door. The storm outside had grown stronger, the wind pushing against me as if warning me to stop. But I didn't. Not this time. Because Daniel thought the past was buried, but he was about to learn that some legacies never die. And behind that portrait, I was about to find something that could destroy everything he thought he owned.
The air in the lawyer's office was heavy, thick with silence that pressed against the walls. The ticking clock was the only sound, marking each second before everything changed. Daniel sat across the polished mahogany table, confident, tapping his pen impatiently. Emily sat beside him, avoiding my eyes. I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her hands twisted the edge of her sleeve. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, adjusted his glasses and looked between us. "Mrs. Mason," he said gently, "you requested this meeting." I nodded slowly. "Yes, I think it's time the truth comes out." Daniel smirked. "Truth? Nora, please. You're upset because you don't understand business. Let's not waste everyone's time." I looked at him, steady and calm. "Daniel, I may be old, but I'm not blind. You sold Mason Industries without my consent." He leaned forward, his voice controlled but sharp. "Your consent wasn't needed. Emily and I were the rightful owners." I opened my handbag and placed a worn yellow folder on the table. His eyes flicked toward it, then quickly away. "What's that supposed to be?" "The papers your father-in-law signed," I said softly, "transferring 50% of the company ownership to me. Not Emily, not you, me." For a moment, no one moved. The lawyer cleared his throat, reaching for the folder. Daniel's face tightened, his confident smirk fading. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Those documents were hidden," I finished for him. "Yes, behind the portrait in John's office, exactly where he said they'd be." Emily's eyes widened. You knew?" I turned to her. "I didn't, not until yesterday, but your father made sure the truth couldn't be erased even after he was gone." Daniel stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous! That paperwork means nothing. The sale's already done." Mr. Harris looked at him calmly. "If Mrs. Mason's signature is missing, the sale is not legally binding." The words hit him like a thunderclap. His face went pale. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You'll ruin everything." I looked at him, my voice trembling but steady. "You already did that when you betrayed the family that trusted you." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, is this true? Did you really?" He cut her off. "Don't you start. Everything I did was for us. Your mother was clinging to a dying business." I felt something inside me crack. "A dying business?" I whispered. "That company fed hundreds of families. It built this home. It carried your wife's childhood dreams. You didn't see a dying business, Daniel. You saw easy money." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was suffocating. Then, quietly, I reached into my bag again and pulled out the small recorder. Daniel froze. "What's that?" I pressed play. John's voice filled the room, warm, firm, unshakable. If anything ever happens to me, Nora is the rightful co-owner of Mason Industries. No sale, merger, or transfer shall be valid without her written approval. The words echoed through the room like a ghost returning for justice. Emily gasped, covering her mouth. Mr. Harris leaned forward, eyes wide. Daniel took a step back. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "It doesn't matter where," I said. "What matters is that your lies end here." He sank into his chair, his hands shaking. "You planned this," he muttered. "You wanted to humiliate me." "No," I said softly. "You did that to yourself. I just pressed play." Emily started crying quietly. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know what he was doing." I looked at her, my daughter, my only child, and saw the guilt eating at her. "You didn't want to know," I said gently. "You believed him because it was easier than believing your mother might still have a voice." Her tears fell harder. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry he was doing that." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! You're all turning against me because of some old recording? You think this changes anything? The deal's already done." Mr. Harris looked at him firmly. "Actually, it changes everything. Without Mrs. Mason's consent, the buyer will have to revoke or renegotiate the sale. You may face charges if fraud is proven." Daniel's voice broke. "You can't do this to me." I met his eyes, calm, steady, unwavering. "I didn't do anything to you, Daniel. You did it to yourself." He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily sat there, crying softly. I reached across the table and took her hand. "Sometimes all you have left is your dignity," I said quietly. "Share this if you'd still choose respect over riches." Mr. Harris cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Mason, I'll make sure these documents are filed immediately. You'll retain full authority to reclaim what's yours." "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking slightly. As I walked out of the office, the cold air hit my face. The city lights blurred through my tears. I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. But somewhere deep inside, there was a quiet strength. I had protected what John and I built. When I reached home, I found Emily sitting on the porch, waiting. She looked up at me, her eyes red. "Mom," she said softly, "I'll fix this. I'll make it right." I sat beside her. "You can't undo what's done, Emily, but you can learn from it." She nodded, staring at the ground. "He's not coming back, is he?" "No," I said. "Not to this house, not after what he's done." The wind rustled through the trees. For a long time we sat in silence, the past and present blending together. Then, softly, I whispered, "Have you ever spoken the truth and still been blamed? Tap heart symbol if that pain feels familiar." Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "Dad would have been proud of you," she said. I smiled faintly, my eyes on the dark horizon. Maybe, or maybe he'd just remind me, the truth always finds a way out. And just as I said that, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. Just 5 words. "You don't know everything, Nora." I froze. The air went still. The story wasn't over. Not yet. The courtroom was silent. Only the sound of shuffling papers and a distant ticking clock filled the air. I sat at the witness table, hands folded tightly on my lap. My heart was steady, but my breath trembled. Emily sat a few rows behind me, her eyes red from sleepless nights. Daniel stood at the defense table, straight-backed but visibly cracking inside. His confidence was gone, replaced by the cold realization that his lies had finally cornered him. Judge Wilson adjusted his glasses, looking down at the documents before him. Mr. Daniel Collins, we have gathered substantial evidence showing you sold Mason Industries without the legal consent of Mrs. Nora Mason, who holds 50% ownership. How do you plead? Daniel hesitated. His lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently, but Daniel didn't move. The judge's voice grew firmer. Mr. Collins? He finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he muttered, his voice shaking. The courtroom murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. Friends of the family whispered among themselves. My heart ached, not from victory, but from the bitter taste of truth. I turned my eyes toward him. You betrayed John's memory, I said softly. You betrayed me, your wife, and everyone who trusted you. Daniel's eyes flashed with anger. I built that company back up. You don't know how hard I worked to keep it alive. You didn't keep it alive, I said quietly. You sold it for your own greed. The judge raised a hand for silence. Mrs. Mason, please continue. I nodded. Before John passed away, he recorded his final wishes. He said the company wasn't just business, it was family. Every decision was meant to protect the people who built it, not destroy them. I looked at the bailiff and gave a small nod. He turned on the speaker system, and John's recorded voice filled the room. Strong, warm, full of life. If anything happens to me, Nora must approve all sales or changes to Mason Industries. She knows its soul better than anyone. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Gasps, murmurs, silence. Daniel's face went pale. Emily covered her mouth, tears falling freely. Daniel's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we request time to... The judge cut him off. Request denied. The evidence is overwhelming. The original ownership documents, the recorded statement, and multiple witnesses confirm Mrs. Mason's authority. Daniel's composure shattered. You think this makes her a hero? He shouted, voice breaking. She's just a bitter old woman clinging to the past. I didn't respond. I just looked at him, calm and steady. And you, I said softly, are a man who threw away his future for a few zeros on a check. The room went silent again. Even the judge's gavel hung in midair. Emily stood up, trembling. Daniel, how could you do this? After everything my parents gave us. He turned to her, desperate. I did it for us, for our future. Our future, she cried. You sold my father's dream and destroyed my mother's trust. What future is left? He reached out for her, but she stepped back. Don't, she said, voice trembling. You've done enough. The judge finally spoke, voice heavy with finality. The court finds Daniel Collins guilty of fraud, breach of trust, and illegal sale of corporate assets. The ownership of Mason Industries is hereby restored to Mrs. Nora Mason. There was a soft gasp across the room, then silence. Daniel sank into his chair, defeated. I didn't look at him again. Some victories feel too heavy to carry. After the session ended, people began whispering. How could he do that to his own mother-in-law? Someone said. Some people only realize too late what real wealth is, another murmured. I kept my eyes on the floor as I walked out. Justice had been served, but peace still felt far away. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me. Mrs. Mason, how does it feel to win? One asked. I paused, then said quietly, winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like the truth finally stopped hiding.
That night, Emily came to my room. She looked lost, her voice small. Mom, he's gone. He left town after court. I nodded slowly. Some people run from their shame, I said. She sat beside me, tears filling her eyes. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix everything, I said gently, but you can start by being honest with yourself, with others. That's where healing begins. She took my hand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I looked at her, my heart softening. You're my daughter. A mother's heart breaks, but it also remembers love. We sat in silence. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of church bells. Later, as I sat alone by the window, I whispered to the night, if seeing truth win gives you hope, tap heart symbols so more people see this. I closed my eyes, letting a single tear fall. I thought of John, his laughter, his strength, the way he believed in goodness, even in hard times. I imagined him standing beside me, smiling. You did it, Nora. You stood for what's right. But deep down, one question lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Justice was done, but can a mother's heart ever truly heal? It's been almost 2 years since that day in court. The house feels quieter now. Not empty, just peaceful. The garden I once neglected blooms again, filled with roses John planted decades ago. I take my morning tea on the porch, wrapped in my old shawl, listening to the wind moving through the trees. Sometimes peace doesn't arrive with a celebration. Sometimes it tiptoes in after the storm, and you realize you've survived. Emily visits every Sunday. She brings fresh bread and stories about her new job at the community center. There's a calmness in her now that I hadn't seen in years. She's learning to smile again, really smile, not the kind that hides pain behind politeness. The company, Mason Industries, is thriving too. We rebuilt it with honest people, not for profit, but for purpose. Every worker's family now gets full health care. John would have loved that. He always said, a business that forgets its people isn't worth saving. Sometimes I still find myself staring at his photograph, the one from our first anniversary, his arm around me, his eyes full of life. For a long time, I couldn't look at it without crying. But now, when I see it, I whisper, we did it, John. We protected what you built. There are moments when the pain still sneaks in, late at night when the wind hums through the curtains and I remember the betrayal, the courtroom, Daniel's face when the truth came out. I don't hate him anymore. Hatred is too heavy to carry for too long. I let it go, piece by piece, like dropping stones into a river. Maybe one day he'll learn what real wealth means. Maybe not. But I've made peace with it either way. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about choosing freedom over bitterness. If you've ever healed after heartbreak, tap heart symbol so I know I'm not alone. Because sometimes healing is the quietest kind of strength. Emily asked me once, Mom, do you ever regret standing up for yourself? I smiled and said, no, darling, regret is for those who stayed silent. The house smells of cinnamon these days. I bake pies again, like I used to when Emily was little. Last week, her daughter, my sweet granddaughter, Lily, helped me make one. She got flour on her cheeks, giggling as she rolled the dough. I looked at her and thought, this is what I fought for. Not the company, not the house, but this, family, the right to love without fear. True inheritance isn't money or property. It's dignity, values, and the strength to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. Sometimes I take out John's old letters. His handwriting is fading, but his words still glow with warmth. Promise me, Nora, he'd written once, you'll never let anyone make you small. The world may try to take what's yours, but they can't take who you are. I kept that promise.
In the evenings, I sit by the fire with a cup of tea, reading those letters while Lily colors beside me. The sound of her humming fills the room. It's a simple sound, but to me, it's peace. There's something beautiful about growing older. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing apologies. You just live, softly, honestly, and with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, like and comment to honor your own journey, because every woman who's ever stood back up after falling deserves to be seen. Emily and I still visit John's grave every spring. We plant yellow tulips, his favorite. This year, she placed a small note beside the flowers. It said, "Thank you for teaching us what love really means." We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. The silence said everything. As I walked back home that evening, the sky turned gold. I realized something simple. Life doesn't always give you what you deserve, but it always gives you a chance to rise above it. I turned off the lights, sat in my chair, and looked out at the stars. The house was quiet again. I smiled and whispered softly, "Sometimes, even after betrayal, love still finds a way."